She had always been the kind of woman who kept her promises, who tied her hair in a bun before. The sun rose, who laid her husband's tie neatly across his dresser and pressed his shirt with care, as if love lived in the starch and folds of cotton. And every morning she smiled as he sipped his tea and kissed her forehead, whispering the same 3 words before stepping out the door. "I'll miss you." And every morning she said them back with a sweetness that never changed until that morning, when she opened the door to find me standing there with that half smile she used to ignore back when I was just the neighbor's son who came to borrow sugar or mow the lawn for a little extra cash. But I wasn't that boy anymore, and she wasn't. Just a woman married to routine. She stood there in her robe, her hair a little loose, eyes blinking against the sunlight, and when she saw me, her lips parted slightly as if a thought had tried to form but never made it out, and I said good morning, in that voice I never used on anyone else, and she nodded, stepping aside slowly, her fingers brushing against the door as if unsure whether to let it close behind me, and the air inside was warm with the scent of cinnamon and jasmine, her favorite. Tea steeping on the counter untouched, and I noticed the little things, how her hands trembled slightly when she reached for the spoon, how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear without realizing, how she avoided my gaze as I leaned against the kitchen counter watching her move. I asked if she needed help, but she said no in a voice too soft to mean it, and when I stepped closer to offer the tea towel she dropped by the sink, she turned to face me, and that was when it happened, that single breath that changed everything, because neither of us moved away, and her eyes searched mine like she had forgotten where she was, and for a second the whole house held its breath. And so did we. She said I should go, but didn't open the door, and I said I would, but didn't take a step, and the silence between us stretched taut until it snapped when her hand brushed mine, and I looked down to see our fingers touching, just slightly, just enough to spark something reckless and tender and dangerous. And when she finally looked at me, it wasn't the look of a woman who wanted to sin, it was the look of someone who had been good for too long and didn't remember how it felt to want so. I leaned in, slow, careful, afraid of shattering her calm, and she didn't stop me, didn't turn away, didn't say no, and when our lips met, it was like something old and buried broke. Hey, the surface like a dream she forgot she had, like a secret she no longer wanted to keep, and the kiss wasn't wild or hurried. It was soft, hesitant, the kind of kiss that asks permission even as it steals breath, and when she pulled away, her eyes were wide, not with regret, but with awakening. She touched her lips as if trying to believe what just happened and whispered this. Can't happen again, but her voice trembled and her eyes never left mine, and when her husband returned hours later, she smiled as she always did, poured his tea, pressed his collar, kissed his cheek, but something inside her had shifted, and I could see it in the way she looked out the window toward my house, toward the place where her heart had started to wander. The days that followed were thick with silence, not the kind that meant nothing was wrong, but the kind that hummed with the weight of everything unspoken. And every morning she watched the clock tick down to the moment her husband would leave, and every morning she told herself she would forget that kiss, bury it like something foolish, something dangerous, and yet every knock at the door made her breath catch every rustle outside, made her heart beat faster, as if her body remembered what her mind tried to deny. She avoided the garden where we once crossed paths. She skipped the usual greetings from the porch and left the tea to grow cold as if warmth itself reminded her of what had passed, but even as she resisted, her heart betrayed her, calling her back to that moment, that kiss, that quiet rebellion against the life she had chosen long ago. When she was too young to know what she was giving up, it was on a Wednesday, when the rain fell soft and steady, that she opened her door. Without hesitation, her robe replaced by a simple dress, her hair damp and loose, her eyes meeting mine not with shame but with resolve, and she said, "Come in," as if we were continuing a conversation, paused only briefly by guilt and habit, and when I stepped inside there was no tea this time, no pretense, no chore to distract us, only the sound of rain and the distance that disappeared when she reached for mesh. Didn't kiss me right away. Instead, she stood close, breathing slow like she was trying to memorize the air between us, and I watched her like someone watching the sea. pull away from the shore, unsure if it would return gentle or wild, and when she finally leaned in, it wasn't a question, it was a promise, a surrender, a whisper. That said, I remember how you made me feel, and I want to feel it again, the kiss was different this time, not soft or hesitant, but deep and aching, full of weeks of denial and nights spent lying awake, and hands that trembled, now gripped tight, as if afraid the moment might slip away, and we moved through the house like people discovering it. For the first time touching the walls, the furniture, the spaces in between, like everything had changed because she had. And I had too. When we lay on the floor, breathless, hearts pounding, she looked at me with tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the fear of how much she had missed feeling alive, and she said, I never thought I would be this woman, but I am. And I said, I never thought you'd let me in, but you did. And in that quiet space between confession and consequence, we found something real, something raw and terrifying and beautiful. And though the rain eventually stopped and her husband would return and life would try to reclaim her, she had tasted something that morning, something more than passion, more than pleasure. She had tasted the truth of who she was beneath the wife, the routine, the perfect smiles, and in that truth she found herself kissing not just a young man, but the part of her she had long forgotten and would never again ignore.